Inside Pitch with Bob Wolff. Brought to you by Palmolive Rapid Shave. Outshaves the brush, outshaves the tube. Rapid Shave outshaves them all. And by Rapid Shave Menthol. So cool, so great, you'll scarcely feel the razor.
Hi, everybody. This is Bob Wolff. Our guest on the Inside Pitch, Paul Richards. We'll hear from Paul, the manager of the Baltimore Orioles, in just a moment. First, here's something else I want you to see and hear. Just watch. I dare say that folks around the baseball circuits believe that when it comes to reclaiming pitchers and getting the most out of them, they look toward Paul Richards of the Baltimore Orioles. Paul has a reputation for many things, and this is one of them. Paul, is there some special trick or strategy that you have as your technique for getting the most out of these pitchers?
Well, Bob, the trick I'd like to use is to pick up a couple of guys that can already throw pretty good and have a good arm and like to stay in shape and like to pitch. Now, frankly, the big thing in getting the most out of pitchers is have something to start with at first. But, of course, all managers have a particular way to handle pitchers and to bring them along. And fortunately, through the last couple of years, we've been pretty lucky with fellows like Billy Loes and George Zubrink and Kenny Lehman and several others. And incidentally, we're quite thankful for it, too. We're not necessarily taking any bows for it, but we are certainly thankful.
We'll take a fellow like Billy Loes, just to single out one, Paul. Here's a fellow who had a sore arm, and the clubs that he had played for just about gave up on him. And all of a sudden you said, well, I'll take a chance, put out the dough. As I recall, it was around $30,000 or so, and you brought him over, and all of a sudden he became a winner and an all-star pitcher for you.
Well, Bob, Billy Loes, that's a kind of a long story, really, and in fact, it's as simple as this, in part, that when we brought Billy Loes to Baltimore, the first thing we found was considerable infection in his, with teeth and also his tonsils. Those sources of infection were removed, and Loes' arm immediately showed some improvement, and as time went on, he became a little better, and until today, the original soreness caused by the first infection is not apparent. And Loes had a little arm trouble this spring, but it was not in the shoulder where the trouble was when he came, but dropped down to the elbow, and more or less a natural soreness that a lot of pitchers have when they first throw this new pitch we call the slider real hard. So we're hoping that Loes will be as good as ever.
Paul, when you make a decision on some of the pitchers that are borderline cases as far as their abilities with other teams, is it actually you're sizing them up from a physical standpoint, whether or not they still have that good fastball or the curve, or do you size them up psychologically and see what you personally as a manager can get out of them, or both?
Well, Bob, that's more or less you look at a pitcher, I look at a pitcher, or anybody else looks at a pitcher. It reminds me something of maybe a horse trader. He looks at a horse, and here's a particular type of horse that he likes, and he likes maybe his style or his something else about his conformation. Maybe he studied the horse's, maybe his heart has something to do with it. And the pitcher, in a lot of ways, one fellow looks at them and sees something else, and somebody else sees another thing. Well, we've got Porter Carrero. We just have gotten him from Kansas City, and we've been watching Porter Carrero now for a couple of years, Harry Burkeen, and we feel that if he can do a couple of things, that his extra leverage that he has from his terrific height, that is at 6'4" or something, and his long arms, that it's just possible with a good sound arm that Porter Carrero could come around and make us a pitcher. Now, in the case of a lot of other fellows, we've tried and worked on, and for some reason they didn't do it. The big trick, Bob, I think, and most baseball managers will be quick to agree with me, you cannot afford to waste time on a fellow who is not a good competitor. Now, the trick is to who's going to decide this and make the final decision on who is the fellow who can go out in the ball game and protect a one-run lead, say from the 7th inning on. Now, if a fellow has the heart and the courage to do that type of pitching, then you can't spend too much time in trying to help him.
Paul, you bring up an interesting point, and Paul is quite a philosopher, I might say, as well as a baseball manager. Perhaps the two go along together. The point of being a great competitor, is this something that's evident actually in the game or on the sidelines to you? Reason I ask that, sometimes a fellow is a good competitor and yet doesn't have the talent to go with it.
Well, Bob, all ball players, and that includes pitchers, they're all individuals. Now, I've often heard it said of a certain pitcher that let's get out in front of him early and he'll quit. Well, of that same pitcher, it might be said, if he ever gets out in front of you, you can put out the fire and call the dog, so to speak. He's going to beat you. And frankly, that is the type of pitcher that most managers like, that includes me, that a guy can, if he gets in front, he is real tough to beat. So, now, a competitor as such, it is my opinion that no ball player, and that includes Babe Ruth and Joe DiMaggio and all the rest of the great ones, did not necessarily come with this particular trait that we call competitor. I think that it has to be developed. I think the player has to go through it. I think he must be convinced that he can handle this situation, and therein lies confidence. And then all of a sudden, if he can develop this thing called competitive courage, then all of a sudden everybody says, well, he's tough and a good competitor.
Thank you, Paul Richards. I'll return in just a moment, but first, hear this. Paul Richards, judging by the box scores of the Yankee-Baltimore games, looks like that Yankee pitching has been real good against you.
Well, Bob, frankly, you know, on the games that we played and watching them, I was more impressed with their defense than I was the pitching. I mean by that those same pitchers pitching for another club, without the sparkling defensive play of Mantle and McDougal and Skowron and Richardson and Bauer, might not have fared so well. But all these fellows making fine plays, and we get a couple of men on base, and here's Mantle or McDougal or Bauer making this sensational play just as if it were normal and the thing to do.
Thank you, Paul Richards. This is Bob Wolff, and that's the inside pitch.
The Inside Pitch with Bob Wolff has been brought to you by Palmolive Rapid Shave. Outshaves the brush, outshaves the tube. Rapid Shave outshaves them all. And by Rapid Shave Menthol. So cool, so great, you'll scarcely feel the razor.